Op 12 en 13 mei 2015 vond in Brussel het internationaal congres plaats over hooggevoeligheid. Aan de Vrije Universiteit Brussel werd door professor Elke van Hoog samen met collega's veel wetenschappelijk onderzoek verricht naar hooggevoeligheid. Een van de belangrijkste sprekers is de wereldbefaamde Elaine Aron, die samen met haar man Art Aron al jarenlang onderzoek doet en ook vele boeken heeft geschreven over dit onderwerp. Annelyn de Boer, HSP-specialist in Ede, heeft een exclusief interview met de inmiddels 70-jarige Elaine. Annelyn begeleidt al jaren hooggevoelige jongeren en volwassenen in haar praktijk Annelyn de Boer Coaching.
There are a lot of diagnoses these days for children, like autism or EDD. Why do you think it's important or necessary to give a label or sort of diagnose to high sensitive persons?
Well, first of all, it's not a diagnosis, so it's very important to keep, I would not say sort of, it's a personality trait, it's 20%. We could call it a label. My thought about it with children is that everyone already labels children. We call them shy, we call them difficult. I mean, all children from birth, people describe them with some label. And I'm simply trying to be more precise because many of the behaviors that children do, you can't see that underneath it there is depth of processing, which I do not consider a weakness in any way, but a great strength. And if we can understand what the trait is basically, then we can understand why it might be that some children and some environments are having difficulties, and we have a better chance of solving it than if we don't understand sensitivity. So the way I explain it is that some children are mislabeled with a diagnosis when they're really only highly sensitive. Then there are children that parents would like to see as highly sensitive who actually have something else happening, like early stages of autism. Then there are children who are both highly sensitive and have disorders. And that's probably the majority that many professionals see. The parents bring the children in, they sense their child is sensitive, but they also don't see how that's going to solve some of the behaviors. So a good example that has been coming up a lot is anxiety. Well, if children or adults are exposed to negative things very much, they become fearful of those things. The more things that are frightening in their environment, the more frightened they will be. This is even more true for sensitive children. If we raise a child not to be, now it's not called overprotecting or coddling children, but if we let them go at their own pace into every situation so that by the time they're an adult, they've been exposed to everything that at least is reasonably comfortable to them. Maybe they won't enjoy huge crowds, and I don't think we should expect them to, or enjoy a lot of loud noise. But on the other hand, they should be able to do anything that they want to do. I was saying the other day that it's a little bit like there's a Buddhist who described that you can have a soft front and a strong back, or a strong front and a soft back. What we want with a sensitive child is a strong back in the sense that we know we want this child to do something, but a soft front in the sense that we're willing to listen to all their reasons that they don't want to, and then to point out ways in which, oh, there's somebody else that you know who's already doing this, or this is a lot like last time when you didn't want to, but you turned out having a good time. So that kind of acceptance and yet encouragement at the same time is essential. As a child, I didn't get that kind of encouragement very much, and as a result, I did not learn to swim until I was 13. I did not learn to bicycle until I was 13. I never learned to ice skate or roller skate because it was convenient for my parents not to teach me, and nobody else taught me.
Are there high sensitive persons all over the world?
I think so. As far as we know, yes, and we would expect them to be about 20%, some more and some less in different cultures.
You already said that it's a minority, but it's not abnormal. Well, that's what a lot of people think.
Because 20% of people could not possibly be abnormal. Not 20% of people. Further, evolution weeds out abnormality pretty good. There's still mutations that come in that are problematic. And also, of course, we don't know with some of the problems that children are having these days, like autism, we don't know how much of that is genetic and how much of that is environmental. We just don't know the cause of that. But evolution just wouldn't allow 20% of people. They would just be gone. And actually, I don't even think negative affect is innate, because what would benefit a person to come into the world depressed and afraid and shy? It doesn't seem like it would be any advantage. There must be advantages to those behaviors in some way, and that's why we found out that people with these genes that seem to predict depression, actually depression is just a side effect in a bad environment of those genes. You do not inherit depression. You do not inherit anxiety. When we call children shy, we are mislabeling them. They may be shy, but they weren't born that way, and therefore they don't have to remain shy. And so I'm totally for treatment of things like anxiety and shyness, but it should be tailored to the child's temperament.
What's, in your opinion, the benefit of signaling children in early age to be high sensitive?
Well, I don't actually recommend that parents tell their children they're highly sensitive. It's one thing to tell the child. It's another thing to discuss it with teachers or with relatives who are saying, you should push this child. I kind of think it's a little bit like discussing sexuality with children. It's like you answer what they need to know, because they don't understand, and what we don't want them to do is feel that there's something wrong with them. Absolutely not. So a child comes home and says, I found out today that those little fuzzy chickens and lambs and calves, we eat them, and I'm very upset by that. Nobody else cared. And so then you might say, well, you're a little different than other children. You really care about these animals. So somebody comes home and says, other kids are bullying so-and-so, and I don't like it. And they say, so you're a little different. Everybody else enjoyed the birthday party, but I actually hated it. It was so noisy. So, yeah, okay, you're a little different. And then maybe the child adds up all these little differences to something and asks a question about, well, what am I? And then you say, you're a lot like your Uncle George. And then there's, Uncle George, right? And I think it's really important to have positive role models, and especially for boys to have positive role models. You know, it's hard to come up with a word to describe this trait. I have thought of better words, and maybe someone will come up with one. At the moment, I'm not sure that there is one. When you say, well, my child's sensitive, very often teachers say, well, your child's a really good student and doesn't cause any trouble. Yeah, but my child comes home exhausted and gets upset at home. And so I wish you could do something at school, and the teacher doesn't really understand. What do you want?
I also have a lot of teenagers in my practice, and they're often very tired when they come home from their lessons. Do you have advices for teachers and schools for supporting these teenagers which drop out in this society, but also the social media? It's everything what they have in schools. It's their lessons, big pressure.
Boy, that's difficult, because I do know I have a good friend that I've been with him through the parenting experience since his daughter was like 1 year old, and we recognize she is highly sensitive, and she's now a teenager, and she's having a very hard time. She's very successful, but there's a lot of jealousy about her, and then she gets bullied, and it's through this internet bullying, and she's been very upset. So it's not a small issue. And adolescents also are different. When sensitive children and sensitive adults are a little different. Sensitive adolescents can generally tolerate more stimulation. They will multitask. They will listen to music while they're studying and all this. Part of it, I think, is a difference in the adolescent nervous system. So maybe they're almost high sensation seekers as a group. It's something unique to adolescent nervous systems. We know that they're different. And some of it is that they don't, at that age, they want to be like the others. So it's very hard for them to take care of themselves and leave themselves out. When I went to college in my first year, I needed downtime to get away. But meanwhile, everybody else made friends. Because if you leave yourself out, you don't get to be friends. You don't belong. You have to sort of wiggle your way in, which is harder. So when the one impression that I get is that it's so important for parents to maintain a stable, loving environment, because all the research shows that makes a difference for the adolescent, and to just help them through the pain. I mean, life is painful too, so often children these days don't have much pain until they hit this, and then it's almost like they don't know how to cope with it. So reminding them the big picture that life is like this, but then the other hand, In high school, unless you go to a private school, and even if you go to a private school, you have to associate with everybody. And the rest of your life, you can choose your friends. You can choose where you work. Even in college, you'll choose your friends more. You'll be other people studying the same things and with the same interests. But you're stuck with everybody at that age.
But they're so tired that they even get sick.
Yes.
Ill.
And you know, that actually was true when I was in high school, too. There's so many activities. All these opportunities, you need to pick and choose, and you need your rest. Sensitive people are often the ones who first notice something that's bad for everybody. We now know that these office spaces that don't have any separations, sensitive people were bothered by them more. But now we know that they're bad for everybody. It reduces productivity. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah. And now we see in some of the airports a quiet room to go to. Well, there didn't used to be that, but everybody uses it, I'm sure, not just the highly sensitive people. So maybe the sensitive kids are struggling, but all the kids are struggling. They just don't know it. I don't know a good solution. A lot of people homeschool children now. I don't know if they do that where you are, but just have children learn at home, and they do a great job. And I think you are getting to see the problems that maybe teachers don't see or maybe don't want to see.
What's your expectation about HSP in about 10, 15 years? Do you think it's accepted, or will we still have to fight for more acceptance?
That's a difficult question, because I think if the science keeps growing, the outcome will be good. But I worry about the number of people who are taking it all kinds of directions that are not correct. For instance, there's a website in the United States that equates it with autism. There's several that say, if you're highly sensitive, you have this illness. Are you almost sure to have this illness? Which isn't true. There's no research to show that at all. In fact, we think that sensitive people in a non-stressful environment are healthier than other people. So it's kind of making this vulnerability issue so striking to people that who wants to be labeled as highly sensitive? I don't want my child labeled as highly sensitive if this is nothing but problems. So there's different motivations why people want to make it into a vulnerability. One of which is it's more profitable to treat people if you can convince them that they got a problem or their child has a problem. And then it turns around and nobody wants to be highly sensitive. So I hope that people will be responsible in that way, because there's plenty to do for sensitive people who are healthy, explaining the trait to them. You don't have to tell them they're all unhealthy and then bring them in for treatment. It's not like that at all, because I think still even the quote, healthiest sensitive person needs to learn to take care of themselves differently than the other 80%. And you have the pressure of the other 80% always. So there's self-esteem issues. You feel you're different. You need to understand, to reframe your past and to understand where your strengths are. Sensitive people in the career area, they tend to change jobs a lot because they don't realize that they have to take into account their sensitivity and the work environment. And that just is information that every sensitive person needs. So there's no need to pathologize.
Thank you very much.